Back for a February edition of the PGN Par 4. I'm Matt Gajtka along with Zac Weiss. Coming up later in this half hour or so, let us be the last to review Netflix's Full Swing documentary series. And also the PGA Tour's elevated events are certainly off to, I would say, an outstanding start if you are hoping for the PGA Tour to have a pushback against LIV here in 2023. We will talk LIV. We'll talk Tiger Woods as well. How could we not? As he showed plenty of game in his return to a PGA Tour competition for the first time in a couple of years. But first, Zac, I want to say hello and hope you're doing well. It's been almost 6 weeks since we last spoke. The last time we talked, the men's tour was in Hawaii. Now we're on to the Florida swing. So plenty of golf between then and now. But for me, I think it's just a continuing theme on the PGA Tour. The elevated events, as I was just talking about, the PGA Tour is trying to, I guess, take a bite out of LIV by getting their bigger stars together more often. And as long as the big stars buy in, then it could all work. And especially, Zac, if they continue to play like they have. We've seen some dynamic leaderboards outside of the Tournament of Champions, which was a reduced field. Still a great leaderboard there. But you look at back-to-back weeks capped off with the Genesis, where you saw essentially the best of the best who aren't playing for LIV Golf go toe-to-toe. And not even counting Tiger Woods, it was an excellent tournament, and we saw Jon Rahm pick up his third win of this season, edging out Max Homa, who has also been an outstanding story, a guy who's elevated himself into the top 10 of the official world golf ranking. And so for me, it's Rahm versus Homa for the biggest story of the new year, and two very different personalities, two different golfers, that's for sure, with widely disparate backstories. Who do you feel like is your biggest story here in 2023?
I mean, are we talking about from the heartbeat or are we talking about on the course? Because on the course, I think both answers are very, very clear-cut answers for the same reasons you just mentioned. I think that on the course, it's been Jon Rahm's game all around. He's had to do it in different ways on different styles of courses, having to deal with the back and forth. Really, just never, even down the stretch when things were a little bit dicey and him and Homo were neck and neck, it just never felt like he panicked outwardly. He just stayed within himself and dealt with everything as best as he could. And just all season has been Mr. Consistency. To a degree, Homa has, but I mean, he's still Mr. California. He's the guy that's performed really well in his home state, and he should. He knows these golf courses really well, but he's really proven his legitimacy on a consistency basis. He was the guy that would maybe win one a year, or he did have a couple of years where he didn't win there after he won his maiden voyage with the Wells Fargo. But beyond that, I mean, he's been lacking the consistency, and I think he took a jump last year where that shift changed, where he wanted to be on the President's Cup team when maybe others don't necessarily take that event as seriously for a multitude of reasons. And for him, it was a motivator. And frankly, Homa really proved himself. I think a lot of people looked at Twitter and looked at what he's able to do on social media. Look what he's been able to do with the pit because of social media. And he can take that and run with it, but he wants to be taken seriously for the golf too. And he's been able to do that on his own volition, and he should be very proud of what happened. But he did show the humanizing aspect after the press conference. Does this one hurt? The easy answer is, well, no. I mean, there's so many other chances to prove myself, but of course it hurts. And he let everybody in. He called Jon Rahm Thanos, for goodness sake, for those of you that are into that. That's not my scene, but I mean, heaven to Betsy. I mean, anybody can relate to that, where it just seems like Jon Rahm's on a different stratosphere. And maybe the guy that was his closest nemesis in terms of on-course results thus far in the early-ish stages of the season was Homa. But frankly, Rahm has shown that he's just like Philip Pelusi. He's a cut above the rest right now. And that's just the way that it is. And at Tiger's event, it's ironic that Jon Rahm has really been doing Tiger things this year, and El Tigre himself kind of had a front row seat of sorts to see it. So it's been a very, very interesting run for the guy that likes to honor Seve and wear his Sunday red like Tiger does. And you can say all the parallels you want, but just Rahm's been able to consistently get it done. And as a guy that's been making headlines, he was very anti-LIV towards the opening, and I think he's become a little bit more sympathetic, but very steadfast in his beliefs. And with his fellow countryman Sergio Garcia having bolted to LIV, the easy thing to do would be to go over there. And he stuck to his guns, and he's been rewarded very handsomely thanks to that PGA Tour elevated event status that you mentioned. He's been able to capture multiple of those elevated events, and with that obviously comes the payday, the notoriety, and once again the #1 ranking just flip-flopping back and forth because the ranking system reminds you of the BCS of football. But what can you do? But in the meantime, this has been Rahm's world. Pretty much every other golfer has pretty much had to just live in it.
Don't get me wrong, if I had to pick one golfer to have a better career from here on out or overall, it would certainly be Jon Rahm. He's got a head start, obviously, with the major and a couple of more victories. But if we're talking about who we want to see, if you're the PGA Tour brass, who you want to see rise a little bit, I think it doesn't hurt at all if you see Max Homa become a more dependable contender, a guy who gets in the winner's circle a little more often, and maybe a guy who contends for a major or two. And I think that's obviously the next step for him. But combine his personality with the fact that the PGA Tour needs to replace a couple of spots there at the top of its marquee after the defections to LIV last year. I think Homa rising up is just as important, if not more important, for the overall health of the PGA Tour. Now, if you're not in it for a rooting interest there, if you don't really care if the tour succeeds or not, I think, yeah, overall, you would have to take Jon Rahm as a more compelling figure in the history of golf. But if you're talking about the PGA Tour wanting to strike back and have more compelling figures, Homa is certainly a different brand of guy, like you say, wears his emotions outwardly, kind of quiet, actually, and a little more subdued than a lot of the top players that we've seen, at least in terms of expressing himself in front of the microphone. He's not trying to be the alpha male macho guy. He's very open about what he's feeling, and that's the way that it seems like that he's able to harness that and use that and put it out there. And like you say, Zach, his results in his home state, whether it be Northern California at the Fortinet Championship, which he's won twice, or down south in LA, where he's finished first and now second in the Genesis, those results certainly speak for themselves. So either way, I think it has been an outstanding start for the tour, taking advantage, Zach, of the fact that LIV did not start its new season, its first real season. Last year deemed its invitational series. That's what they're calling it, at least, or they did call it. Now it's the LIV Golf League. We've seen some teams change. We've seen some team names change. And now we see a full schedule of 14 tournaments that start this weekend as we record this, in fact. So the PGA Tour had a head start. And, well, we'll talk about LIV a little bit later because I don't want to ignore the fact, obviously, that the greatest golfer in the history of the game, most might say, got back on the course and didn't look too bad doing it. Now, he didn't finish in the top 10 or the top 20, but Tiger Woods made the cut on the number and physically didn't look like he was limping very much. His club head speed, his ball speed were way up, like in the top third of the tournament. And for me, Zach, that's incredibly impressive because he can't really push off that back foot anymore, off the trail foot, the right foot for him. So he's doing it a totally different way. Maybe this is the 5th or 6th version of the Tiger Woods swing. I've lost count at this point. So what do you think about that compared to last year where it almost felt like he was ranging towards ceremonial golfer status? After what I saw at the Genesis, though, tough course, a ball striker's course, as he put it many times over there, a place where he's never really contended. But for me, he showed me enough to make me believe that we're actually going to see him, if not necessarily be right there for a major championship this year or a PGA Tour champion or a PGA Tour win. He's going to make it interesting based on what I saw this last weekend in Los Angeles.
Well, Tiger Woods has consistently said that if he's in a tournament, he's in it to win. I think last year his win wasn't defined by if he lifted a trophy. It was just being around the guys, just getting some reps inside the ropes, seeing how he could mentally handle it. I think he knew physically what it was going to entail, and he couldn't make things any worse. I mean, for goodness sake, he won the US Open on one leg. So I think the guy has quite the threshold of pain. And I don't know if anybody in the universe knows the golf swing better than Tiger Woods. You can say this swing coach, that swing coach, but for a guy, because of all of these surgeries and the need to be the best version of himself, to have contorted his swing so many times, it speaks to the understanding of the swing and what he needs. And obviously, two very, excuse me, glowing examples of that with Justin Thomas and Rory McIlroy, both in his group the first 2 days. When I saw the pairings sheet, I had two thoughts. The first thought was obviously the two names I mentioned. It's going to bring out the competitive side of Tiger, which is only going to help him. But B, and more importantly to me, was the late early tee time, having to go late and then coming right back around. I get that TV has their things where they want everybody on and they want all eyes on it. But that was what had me most concerned about Tiger, where we were really going to find out where his recovery process and where his mental state was in all of this with that quick recovery. And I think it helps when you birdie the last 3 holes in the first round. You get the little quick teach off of Justin Thomas's little effort endeavor on the final hole. And really, I think that propelled him, but it was almost taken away. Actually, I spoke to Jeff Hathorn of 93.7 The Fan, good buddy of both of ours, Matt, and he asked me going into the week what I thought we were going to expect from Tiger. I said, I'll be honest, he's probably going to make the cut right on the number and probably finish in the 60s in terms of placement. I just thought he wasn't going to have the gas and the stamina. I mean, everybody talks about the walk up all those steps at the end of the round. It's not an easy walk right there, and that's
Yeah, that's
something
brutal.
that Tiger last year really would. Yeah, if he's hosting his own tournament, why does it have to go along the ascending stairwell? But anyways, the guy last year might have needed that infomercial, that little seat that you can just push the button and go up. But I mean, Tiger's not a charity case anymore. I mean, he never was, but physically, he's not in that state anymore. He expects to win golf tournaments, and though he didn't get it done, he didn't make a fool of himself. He wasn't ceremonial. He battled himself a little bit, and he wasn't truly in contention. But I think that a lot of fans are going to have unreasonable expectations from this, that they're going to see Tiger in so many more events. I think you see him in the majors. I mean, he did 3 last year, and that was with his body deteriorating. Maybe the Memorial because he has such a good history there, but I mean, I wouldn't even count on that. You're going to see Tiger just compete in the majors and compete for the hell of it because he loves the sport and he wants to compete with himself. And he wants to continue that relationship with these young golfers. I mean, with so much feeder from the Corn Ferry Tour and so many guys starting to break out and being allowed to break out now, you said it yourself. With LIV, there's so many new cast of characters that have been able to rise to the top. I mean, yesterday, Thursday at the time of this recording, it was the Pierceton Cootie story. I mean, that's not even an angle. That's not an angle a lot of people saw coming. And Tiger's going to be introducing himself to guys like that as things go on here. And thank goodness he has the opportunity to do that. So we'll see how everything heals. We'll see. I mean, there was different parts of his game that were letting him down at different times. I mean, I think he was working so hard on finding his shot. I think at some points he was also neglecting his putting a little bit, and chipping and putting are kind of the first things that come. I mean, but that's typical with any PGA Tour professional golfer. I mean, you're working to find a fairway, especially on a course like that where you can set yourself up for success. And sometimes you're not able to put the ball on the flat stick. And credit Joe LaCava for kind of calling his caddy for calling him out on that and saying, look, you need to do your due diligence here. And he had his best round since he came back from the injury. So there speaks a lot to that. And it also speaks that Joe knows that what buttons he can and can't push. That's a veteran caddy knowing his guy. And frankly, I mean, Tiger responded, and it's very much a burden when you're playing in your own tournament that you host. Obviously, Tiger has the hero that he also has to be, that he's also a host of as well. So there's a lot that comes out of that. So I'm sure that once everything was done, and obviously he didn't finish the way he wanted to on Sunday, he was probably gassed, and rightfully so. I mean, all the obligations, all the pictures, all the media attention, all of the media interviews, all the partner interviews, everything. There was a lot to it. So yeah, this will be the last we see of Tiger until the extremely awkward champions dinner at Augusta National, which is going to be it's going to be like a first date. But I mean, that's the state of affairs. So Tiger has every reason to be proud of himself. He has every reason to feel that he should contend. But I think when he went back with his team, he immediately got regimented physically, took maybe a few days down, and then just got right back to it. So good for him for really having a good week on all accounts, and we'll see where it takes him.
I'm glad you brought up the short game because even last year when he was barely getting around, you could tell he could still strike the ball just fine. It was a matter of being sharp around the greens. I think some of that just comes from lack of tournament reps lately. There's only so much you can do to replicate that sort of pressure and just the competition itself. It's very difficult to I guess test yourself in a way that will translate over to actually out there in a PGA Tour or a major event. So there's that. But also, I just think Tiger is able to stand on the range as long as he wants and hit shots. But it really is work for him to get after it on the putting green and chipping around, getting into the practice bunkers, that sort of thing. So that part of the game actually seems to lag behind. I don't know if it's just a little bit less fun for him to work on that. In which case, I guess join most of the rest of amateur golfers out here who I know for me it's a lot more fun to go to the range than it is to practice putting and chipping. But Joe LaCava, as you alluded to, he's not afraid to throw that stuff out there, even in the media. And there's a guy who's very secure in his job to be able to speak out about the little needles that he's throwing Tiger's way to make sure that he's at the top of his game. And that's really what it's all about. I think Tiger appreciates that, the fact that he's got a guy on his bag that is able to say, hey, you know what? You just haven't been as sharp in this part of your game. And if you want to put your best foot forward this week and in the future, maybe we could devote an extra 15 to 20 minutes toward that in the pre-round. It's not like he can do a lot because it takes a long time for him to get his body revved up and ready to go for a tournament round. But little tinkers here or there, and all of a sudden, if you're Tiger Woods, you remember a certain feel or something that you rode to a big win or a huge moment in your career. He's got plenty to choose from. So he's got a bigger mental Rolodex there that he can draw from, and just something can pop up. And hey, that's what's common among all golfers, is it just takes one little feel or swing thought sometimes to get you through a round or through a weekend. So Tiger is back. I guess we'll see about he alluded to the fact you might see him before the Masters. I wouldn't bet on that. I don't know if he's going to throw himself out there for the Players Championship. Like you said, Zach, I still think the Memorial is probably a less than 50-50 shot that'll get down there. But I'm saying definitely all four majors. And I don't think we're going to see him, barring something that pops up here. But I don't think we're going to see him limp to the finish line or even withdraw as he did in Tulsa at the PGA Championship last year. The one thing is the PGA is in Rochester, New York this year in May. And, well, we all know we have lived in the Northeast or the Midwest for our entire lives. The weather's not too dependable in May in our part of the world. So I guess we'll put a little asterisk next to that one at Oak Hill as the PGA returns there. All right, Zach, I joked that we'd be the last people to review Full Swing on Netflix. I blew through all 8 episodes recently here over the past week, and I found it extremely bingeable for those of us who follow golf closely. At the same time, I don't know how much of it you have seen, but my biggest complaint was that it's not very, but at times it's on the surface in terms of digging into finding the real nature of these guys' personalities. A little bit of it seemed, I don't want to say scrubbed, but there wasn't necessarily an extremely nitty-gritty feel to a lot of it. But I understand they wanted to tell a lot of stories. And if you have 8 hours worth of video there to tell the stories, that can actually fly by in a hurry, especially when you're trying to single in on a couple of events or a handful of players. So you can only do so much in one season and 8 hours of running time. And I think overall, it's worth your while if you are a golf fan. And if you're not a golf fan, I hope it does draw you in. But for those of us, Zach, who have been following the sport forever and have played the sport forever, I think the constant explanations of what a cut is and how bad these guys really want to win, it's like, we get it. We get it. Every episode, they tended to hammer home certain points, and it was a little bit spoon-fed. But for me, episodes like the Joel Damon episode really got you inside a guy who, on the surface, looks like a genial fella and someone you'd like to spend some time with. He and his caddy, Gino Bonnaly. But there was, I think, some unexpected on my end heartstrings being pulled there in the Joel Damon story, and also seeing someone like a Sahith Theegala battle to the wire and how emotional it made him in his rookie season to nearly pull out a win with his family watching, with one of his elementary school teachers watching, I believe it was. So it did, I think, humanize a lot of those players we already know the Justin Thomas story, but that still gets me every time, seeing the old home videos with his dad teaching him, and seeing the relationship they still have to this day. So I think there were some swings and misses there, but for the most part, I would give it a passing grade, and I'm eager to see what they do in season 2, because as I understand it, they're already shooting season 2. So what were your impressions of Netflix's Full Swing?
I have to make this extremely clear that this was tailored for the casual golf fan or the person that's looking to maybe understand why they need to be a fan of golf. People that are diehards that follow the sport, they already know the Joel Damon story. I've already walked 18 holes with Joel Damon. I'm very much aware of the Joel Damon story. I'm very much aware of the Tony Finau story, which was also, I think, one of the really, really good stories in this series. I mean, for goodness sakes, him and his brother were on the big break, which was very humanizing, and it's nice to go back and revisit that. But this show isn't for either of us, Matt. It really isn't, because we followed the tour. I think sometimes having too much footage can cause distraction among the edit. My biggest critique would be that there was just too much bouncing. There was just too much bouncing back and forth, and you're cutting from here to there because you don't want to leave something off. I think when you have a first season and you have Live, I think ultimately really caused a lot of distraction with the season as well. I think the whole purpose was on the PGA Tour, and guys that had committed to opening themselves up to this series now are spending more of their time answering questions about Live and the potential of what it has to offer, or guys that might be preparing to make that jump participating, and maybe their comments don't age as well because they've made the jump. So it was a very, like Ian Poulter said, it was a very interesting year to decide to start covering the PGA Tour, as he inserts Live Chip here. But regardless of that, you still saw some really good things. You saw Mito Pereira in real time reacting to him basically losing a major, and how he reacted to that in real time, and then had to collect himself and made the decision to talk to reporters. You had Rory McIlroy finally come around towards the end and really open himself up, where he didn't care that the cameras are there when he said "F you, Phil" to Phil Mickelson, and that was uh, Rory's been so PC, and he's been so gung ho, but he stuck to the message. So for a lot of people, I'm sure they were shocked to hear him utter that and to see the cameras there and he just literally not care. Those small things were the things that I think I enjoyed the most in this series. I think now that the casuals have an understanding of what to expect, they understand golf, a lot of those platitudes and those general areas can kind of be removed. That surface area can be removed, and now they can have a more focused edit with a lot more guys that you're going to be able to root for, that might be there for the whole season. It might not just be there for one episode. They might not have to do the Jordan Spieth episode, the Justin Thomas episode. They can just dive right in. A lot of the players now will have an understanding. Maybe the PGA Tour can say, look, part of your membership requires now, if they ask you to speak, we expect you to be able to be a willing participant in this. Get more guys. You can still get more stories. So you didn't really hear Jon Rahm's story, for example. Maybe, well, I don't think Patrick Cantley's a guy that'll ever share his life story. Well, he has, but let you really fully in. He's just not really that guy. But it would be interesting to see what changes they make. I think the chaotic editing really was a little bit more of a distractor to me, where it's bouncing back and forth. And now all of a sudden it's a story, especially if you're watching more than one episode in one sitting. It can make it sometimes a little bit tough to follow along, whether you're casual or not. So I would say when you have the 300 episode hours of footage, just know what you want to do. If you have 8 hours, say, well, look, this is what we're going to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be chronological, but I'd like for it to maybe have a little bit more rhyme or reason and organization here. Not, oh, this was too good to leave off the cutting room floor, so we're just going to put this in there. But a more focused edit, I think, can go a long way. But absolutely, it's a passing grade, no question about it.
Yeah, it is difficult. I will say I'll give the Netflix crew some credit here, because it is difficult in a sport where the venue changes every week and it's literally a globe-trotting sport when you throw in what LIV was doing too. So you're going to have some of that bouncing around, but I do agree that it was distracting, especially when you're watching the episodes back to back, which of course everyone at Netflix knows that a lot of people do. And I definitely did that too. So you started with Harbour Town, then you were at the PGA Championship, then you were somehow back at Waste Management in the winter, and then you were at the Masters, and then you were at the Open Championship. And in the case of Finau, you were in Detroit and Minnesota. And within the actual episodes, there was some good chronological continuity. But overall in the season, until you got to the very end when they brought up the Open with Rory, and then moving on to the FedEx Cup playoffs immediately after, that was I think the most cohesive part of it was the way they wrapped it up. So they at least put a bow on it that way. And again, it was a tough assignment, as Poulter alluded to, and I'm glad we saw Ian get a little bit of a deep dive there. I once saw an episode of Faraday with him that I enjoyed, and really the only reason as an American golf fan that I didn't like him in certain spots was because he always beat our butts in the Ryder Cup every year. It wasn't necessarily a personal thing. I think it was more of the fact that he was just so unbeatable in certain match play situations that really broke our hearts, honestly, on this side of the pond. So I get that he's a little showy for a lot of folks, but I think you saw enough scenes with his family that appeared rather genuine, and I did enjoy that. Poulter's a great story, a club pro who decided to give it a go on the European Tour, made it, then made European Ryder Cup teams. Never won a major, of course, but he's been one of the major characters in the sport in a couple of different ways. And now in his mid-40s, obviously cashing in with LIV. So that gives us a good segue right to talking about LIV Golf, now called the LIV Golf League. I noticed they even changed their Twitter handle as I was looking for results today from Mayakoba. So the first event for LIV takes over an old PGA Tour event in Mexico. And in fact, native son Carlos Ortiz did quite well in front of his homeland fans, I guess you could put it that way, friends and family, I'm sure, and plenty of folks who watched him coming up. But the story about LIV is how do they follow it up, right? And there was much discussion about, well, what kind of TV deal are they going to get? Well, they ended up signing on with the CW and the CW app. But you know what, Zach, today when I wanted to watch, I just went to livegolfplus.com. I didn't even go to the CW. So it feels almost like, what was the point of all the fanfare there if they were going to provide in the final week before the first tournament an alternate option with a website and an app that you can download and go around the whole CW thing? I didn't think it would work in the U.S., but apparently, well, it did for me today for the first round. So it still kind of feels like they're making it up as they go along. But at some point, you do have to shift from that startup mentality to a league or a sports property that has a little bit more runway here and needs to find a little more continuity. But again, this is their first real season, as they're calling it. So I am still willing to give a pass on figuring things out. And for me, I think the hardest part now, like I talked about at the top of the show today, Zach, is just that the PGA Tour had a head start on them. And from what I could tell, from what I would say, it's been a dream start for the tour. You have some of these marquee events, both elevated and in the case of Pebble Beach on a legendary course, a legendary event for many decades. So it's a big-time first serve from the PGA Tour. Now you see what LIV has in terms of a return. Is there anything LIV can do in the time between now and the Masters to steal some of that publicity back?
I mean, their off season, they actually have an off season, unlike the PGA Tour. I mean, 2 weeks is lip service. You have all of this time to strategize. What went right? What went wrong? How can we improve our roster? And all we heard was this executive got fired, this executive left. How is that going to make you feel hopeful for what's going to happen in year two? I can't give them a pass because they had an off season. They had all this time to figure everything out. And I mean, for goodness sakes, all you said is, well, we've got a TV partner. You might not be able to watch it. Oh, and then you might be able to watch it on replay. You might not be able to watch shots in real time. You might be able to watch them on delay. And you're saying it's online on this LIV Golf Plus. I mean, it's still a mess. They still don't have everything figured out. And you have this product bragging about how this is the place to go. Still don't have the world ranking thing figured out, which is not on them. And then you have Sergio Garcia complaining about Rory McIlroy not being the mature one, and that's ending their friendship. Oh yeah, the same Sergio Garcia that, repeatedly defaced bunkers, made a racial slur about fried chicken to Tiger Woods. Anytime he didn't get his way, he pouted. His breakup with the PGA Tour was yelling at a rules official and shutting out the media. But yeah, let's blame Rory McIlroy as the not mature one. So many of the golfers not coming into the tour on form, and that's why they're chasing the money. It's still very much a work in progress. Now, granted, and then of course it's another shot at the PGA Tour by playing at Mayakoba. I mean, Pat Perez even said, "Oh, well, we can play here, but the PGA can't. What's wrong with that?" So there's still the juvenile stuff. We already know how you feel. Just play. Let your play do the talking, because clearly the executives still can't figure out what they're looking for. And it's year two. The new car smell is starting to wear off. You don't want it to end up looking like a novelty act. And that's the direction they're heading. They have the talent. I mean, when the biggest stories within the last week are not who was signed, but Brooks Koepka maybe having some regrets whether he joined or not after he's a team captain, and Sergio Garcia running his mouth for at least the 11 millionth time. I mean, this isn't good stuff. It's concerning, and it's not even about the politics of it anymore. It's all about the common sense, and they still haven't figured that out. And as a viewer, as a consumer, that concerns me. I want to be involved and I want to enjoy this. I mean, for goodness sakes, they're going to be playing a couple of stops within a few hours of those that are Pittsburgh fans that might want to head down and watch. But I mean, who's to say that it's going to be on even more life support? I mean, yeah, they have all the money in the world they possibly need, but when you don't have an enjoyable product, that makes it tough. You can only get so many people to agree to cut their hair into Cam Smith mullets before things end up working, before things end up dissolving. So they have a lot of questions to answer, and they should have already had the time to figure out some of those answers and have a business strategy. But it seems like the only business strategy they have is, here's a few more Franklins, now go play. That's not a winning strategy. That's almost like a shut up and dribble, but it's more like a shut up and tee off. I mean, that's what it's getting to at this point. And as a fan, I'm concerned. If I'm an executive, I'm pissed. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I mean, the PGA Tour, it's not just a dream start because of what they're doing, but it's also because of what Liv's not doing and what Liv has just not done and how they're missing the mark. And it makes me concerned about their longevity of legitimacy. Forget their longevity, just strictly from a legitimacy standpoint, because at this point, I mean, if fans think that it's a joke, I mean, maybe they're within their rights, who's to say? But there's a lot of constructive criticism that's going on, and it's only going to get louder the more and more times they strike out.
The biggest disappointment for me in terms of LIV and its off season was the schedule announcement. I was expecting a little more flash or maybe a couple of glitzy additions there after last year. And I will give them credit. They're going to Valderrama in Spain. We haven't seen the best players in the world on Valderrama since the 1997 Ryder Cup, basically. And they are going to Australia, which I'm excited about that. They're not going to Royal Melbourne, but the Grange Golf Club has gotten great reviews. That's coming up, I think, a couple of weeks after Augusta. But some of these courses, for instance, just reading down where they're playing after Mayakoba, which was a middling PGA Tour stop at best. You have Tucson, the Gallery Golf Club, never heard of that one. Orlando, Orange County National, never heard of that one. Singapore, I do like the worldly approach here, so I'm not going to complain about going to Oceania, to the Far East. Then you've got Tulsa, Cedar Ridge, not Southern Hills there. A couple of Trump courses, of course. You've got the one in D.C., Trump National, Washington, and Trump Bedminster, which we had last year, and also Doral, which is also owned by the former president. But that's not even finishing up the year. I would think Doral would continue to be your finale. Instead, they moved the finale to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and I guess we all know why they did that, but it feels rather anticlimactic. But as you alluded to, Zach, there are opportunities for fans in the Pittsburgh area to go check out the LIV Golf Tour, the LIV Golf League, sorry, live, both in D.C. and also at the Greenbrier in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. It's going to be about a 4-hour drive either way for either one of those. For me, the Greenbrier is a bucket list item. I always wanted to see that one, but I don't know if I'll be able to get down there. And again, you are picking off a PGA Tour venue, but not exactly one of the best. So we're seeing now the struggles of building from the ground up, even if you do have billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's still a struggle to beat back an established brand like the PGA Tour, and that's what LIV is going through right now. Zach, we got about a minute left. Any thoughts on where LIV is going this year, or anything else there that stuck out to you?
I mean, no, honestly, TikTok, but they have to figure things out. Push comes to shove. That's the bottom line. I'm hoping that Scotty Scheffler can make a little bit more noise, and I'm looking to see what the LPGA can do to get some legitimacy there. And congrats to Bernhard Langer on tying Harold Irwin. So quick nod to Bernie as well, looking to see if he can break the record.
At age 65, Zach, you covered him a few times at the senior PGA at Fox Chapel, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and you were also there for Max Homa's win last year in the DC area at the Wells Fargo. So, yeah, some of the guys you've been hanging around and covering, they're continuing onward and upward, even as Bernhard Langer gets into AARP territory. I guess he's well into AARP territory at this stage. He's a super senior and, well, more way than one. That's for sure. All right, let us know what you think about all the hot topics we touched here. 4 topics, but plenty of branches there on that tree to try to find something that you liked and take a bite out of. Comments below here on YouTube, on Pittsburgh Sports Live, also on Pittsburgh Golf Now. You can find us there throughout the golf season, which is just getting started. Thank you for watching the PGN Par 4.